Welcome to the Palisade Podcast. This is your host, Anthony Lindsay.
And Stephanie Moreno.
We're here with Chris Mason. So, Steph, you have some questions.
So, my first question for you today is, do you feel that the teachers we have today are doing a good job?
Yes. So, I'll give you a little bit background on myself. I'm a high school principal in Texas. I have been in education for 14 years, started out as a teacher and a coach here in North Texas, and have been a principal for 4 years now. I think in the last 5 years, our teacher prep programs, especially in Texas, have done a very good job of preparing our students or our teachers to be not only qualified but kind of effective as they come into classrooms as new teachers.
So is that one of the most important things you think is teacher preparation? Because I've heard studies that show that teachers with higher degrees were better and more effective teachers. So if you have a PhD, you'll be more effective than a teacher with a master's degree. Has that been the case?
With high school, with non-college level, I would think that is not true. I think teachers that are successful and high schools and junior highs and elementary schools are teachers that love being around kids. You can prepare people to be a teacher, and they can learn about pedagogy and how brains work and stuff like that. But until you get thrown into a classroom with 20 kids that are your own, or, for high school teachers, we're a fairly small rural school. And my teachers have 140 kids come through their room in a day, so until you kind of get in there, you can have good content knowledge, but if you don't know how to relate to kids and you don't know how to build lessons and things like that, then you're not going to be successful no matter what your degree is.
So is it like some intrinsic value? Are you able to judge, like, what is it about a teacher? Like when they walk in and you say, hey, this is a teacher that I might hire. What is it about them that screams like, okay, this is going to make a good teacher?
Yeah. That's a great question. For me, I really I believe this to my core as an administrator and somebody that's going to be in education for, a lot longer, I hope. But our kids need people that are not after paychecks. The average teacher salary in Texas, it'll show you like $55,000. But that's maxed out. Those are teachers that have taught 20 plus years. For most of us, here we're a rural small school, my first year teachers will make $36,000. So what I have found is if you're somebody that is looking to just have a job to make money and live life outside of that, then teaching is probably not the profession for you. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we really look at and talk about is whether or not they have a passion to help students. And I tell my kids my teachers all the time that, our job's very hard if you feel called to it. And I think it's impossible if you're not. We have a lot of demands on us in Texas with state testing and things like that for our students. And I really try to get to know in the interview process, know the teacher that's interviewing with me a little bit and try to find out what their personality is. And, a big success factor for teachers is, can they relate well with students? Do they know how to, handle confrontation? Do they know how to manage their time well? So I would think very intrinsic. You kind of have to be able to talk with them and get to know them a little bit to determine whether or not they're going to be a good fit for your school and whether or not they'll be a good fit for your kiddos.
That makes sense. How big of an issue is the compensation package? Like, do you find that to be kind of an obstacle when you're trying to bring in good teachers and stuff?
Yeah. So a little background of Texas, so we kind of hit everything from rural to big schools. So we've gone to like a 6A school might have 3,000 kids in it, mm-hmm. in a campus. Whereas for us, like we're a rural school, I have 300 students at my high school. And the way that Texas budgeted school is you're really getting money based on how many kids you have. Mm-hmm. And the big disparity in Texas for us is a small school like I'm at currently, Leonard High School, like we're Northeast Texas. If you looked at some of the schools that are close to us in the McKinney area or Plano, these are big metroplex kind of areas. A teacher can drive 45 minutes from us and make almost $20,000 more a year.
Oof.
Wow.
Yeah. So for us, it's very difficult as a rural school to compete with those people. And we lose teachers to attrition. We're about 10% attrition every year, where you have teachers that were in the profession that are no longer in the profession. But you throw another 5 or 6% on that to rural schools who lose teachers to bigger places because they don't have to work as hard, and then they also make more money.
So how do we work on that? Because I mean, Texas being as huge as it is, it seems like a unique issue for larger states where there is a big disparity between the large metropolitans and then the smaller areas. So
I think the states have to step in, the state governments have to step in and re-examine how they budget public education.
Yeah.
And as an advocate for public education, I'm a firm believer in. Horace Mann says that education is the great equalizer. I'm a firm believer in that. I believe that, and I've seen it because I've been in very dense urban areas as a teacher before, and then rural areas as well. But for us as educators, the way we get kids to break poverty cycles and get them out of the prison, the pipeline, and those kind of things is through education. And sometimes that gets, not sometimes, right now I think it is thrown on the back burner and money goes other places. So for me, I'm a high school principal. I have 2 master's degrees and a bachelor's, right? And I probably make, compared to people with a similar education and background, anywhere from $50 to $60 or $100,000 less than what people like with the same degree, not the same degree, but the same level of education get paid in other areas. So what happens is cream of the crop type of people that have education degrees, they get into education for a little while and then they go somewhere else because they can make more money.
Yeah.
And provide for their families better. So really, I think it starts with the states looking at how they fund public education, and it needs to be with more fidelity. It has to be more fair. If a big rich school district that has, so in Texas, and it's different everywhere, but in Texas, we pay a portion of it through local taxes. So we're a very poor school district. We're about 65% socioeconomically disadvantaged, which means they're under the poverty level on income, right? Which tells you right now that our taxes are not going to be very much. So we get almost we get about 5/6 of our budget from the state, and only 1/6 of the local revenue that we make actually pays for school. So until they come in and they set up a system that's a little bit more fair, and I would like for them to come in and pay teachers, hey, the starting salary for a first-year teacher in the state of Texas set by the state is $60,000. Until they do something like that, it's never really going to change. Because right now the state says as a school district, you don't have to pay. We could start our teachers out at $27,000 a year. Wow. So I want you to, think of that in perspective of, well, I've gone to school for 4 years. I've completed these, College of Education programs, taking these tests. You have to take a content test. You have to take a professional test to become a teacher. So the same type of testing a lot of other people take. Yet if I'm a lawyer or I'm a law student and I'm going to, start that, I'm going to make X amount of dollars over what a first-year teacher might make. So until they're willing to really come in and revamp old systems of finance for education and really say, hey, this is important, we're going to continue fighting the same fight we fight right now.
So I've heard the argument made from a lot of libertarians that private education would be a viable solution to end the public school experiment, essentially, and start the voucher system, where if you had a community like yours where there are a large population of disadvantaged people, they would essentially get a voucher to go to a different school, one that has the best numbers in the area, one that they can actually reach. Now, do you think that public school is still the option if, the next phase, it seems like, is the push towards private education?
So the best analogy I can give you is this. So if we were in a manufacturing business, right, and say school A is this private education group, and say both of us are going to make chairs. Well, school A, the private group, gets to go out and pick the very best quality product they can pick, right? And they're going to be very, very picky on, yeah, that's the best wood, these are the best screws, this person right here is the best, manufacturer. Yeah. And they're going to produce a very high quality chair. Mm-hmm. Well, public schools don't get to pick the supply, right? We don't get to pick the raw materials coming in. We literally take any and everything that walks through our door that lives in our school district, and we are told, hey, no matter what it is, in essence, you're going to have to make the best chair you can. Well, with that mentality, a private school is always going to look better on paper because the kids that they're getting are different than what we get. And the school voucher system will never work because it is designed specifically for wealthy families to continue to produce wealthy families. Mm-hmm. And that sounds kind of conspiracy, but like in Texas, they talk about a voucher system. Well, a kid for a school year might get about $5,600 worth of funding. Well, if I give a kid $5,600 to go to a private school, that's going to pay maybe a third or a fourth of what most private schools charge. Well, that poor family is not going to be able to make up the difference anyway. And secondly, those private schools that want to look good on paper will never accept that child that has educational needs that they don't want to have to mess with. If that makes sense. If it's a special needs student or a student with, dyslexia or things that are going to skew their numbers, they have a little bit more ability to say, no, thank you.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you can't necessarily run education like you would a for-profit company. And if your whole objective is to get the highest test scores possible and is not essentially serving the public need, it doesn't really sound like the best solution.
Right. And that's the big argument against like state assessments and things like that. And I talk to, so we have school boards that are in charge of our schools. So when we see scores come out, they always want to try to compare last year's scores to this year's scores and vice versa. And I always try to make sure that they understand, like, one group of kids that moves on from last year to this year, I don't ever compare grade level of kids. So like, I've got a class of juniors that are higher performers on standardized testing. Well, I don't compare that group to a group that's under them that they might have improved. For example, my math scores for my freshman last year improved 20% from the previous year. So I would say that's a fantastic jump, and that my freshman Algebra 1 teacher did a fantastic job of getting those kids moving forward. But if you took my freshman score and looked at my sophomore scores, what they scored, there'd be a big gap in between, and you would look at those numbers and say, well, they didn't do as good. Mm-hmm. Well, so I always tell them, look, we're not going to compare apples and oranges. We're going to compare our apples with our apples. So I always track kids as they come through and not try to compare my freshman group to my sophomore group or my sophomore group to my senior group, because they're different kids. Mm-hmm. And what we look for is year-to-year growth and things like that. Did I answer that question?
Yeah. So do you think that teachers having tenure is a good idea?
No.
How come?
Just hard no.
I think it's a company just like there's things that education could steal and do very good with. I think tenure, more often than not, will let teachers be lazy and not on fire to produce.
Completely agree. Absolutely.
It's the same thing like with my job. I would never want someone to come and tell me, hey, you're good. Don't worry about it. Because I think that gives us an opportunity to sit back and, as a campus administrator, I try to wake up every day and remind myself why I do this. I don't do it for the paycheck. I do it to give our kids opportunities to have better lives than what they're presently offered, or to chase dreams that they want to chase. So when you talk about tenure and you talk about, I think that's where complacency kind of falls in. And when we see issues in public education and we see issues in education in general with tenure, it's those ideas of, well, I can do what I want. They can't fire me.
With teachers with tenure, the argument was that they would have more academic freedom to teach how they think would be most effective without the risk of punishment for not making their numbers or punishment for going outside of the box. Like, is that hasn't been the case though? Like, is it more?
No, I think that comes with hiring a good superintendent, your leader of your school. So like if we're talking a business, that's your CEO, and putting things in place that allow your people to feel free to teach those kids what's the best way they can. Now, we're going to do stuff that we know has research-based, success. So like my campus, if we're those classes that have end of course exams that we're going to take state tests on, well, we have a set curriculum and a scope and sequence that we're going to follow. Now, I trust my adults to be the expert in the content. So if my algebra teacher comes to me with that scope and sequence and says, hey, I know I'm supposed to be doing unit 2 right here, and this state standard says this, but that is actually a foundational thing, and we have to cover it in the first section. Is that okay? I'm going to say yes. So I think that argument comes from really, really rigid administrators, and I think what we're seeing now, what I see from my colleagues that are other principals, is we're kind of swinging back away from that really, really rigid view into trusting our teachers, wanting them to have feedback in the scope and sequence and the curriculum that they're teaching. And by having those conversations, by having that kind of give and take and those feedback sessions, we're getting the best result out of it.
Do you find experience of the teacher to be more important than the educational pedigree, their background? Like, say, if you had a choice between the Harvard-educated new teacher versus the teacher with 10 years of experience in various backgrounds, who do you bring in?
Again, I think that, that's a very difficult question because, I think if the world was sunshine and, butterflies, I would pay all my teachers $150,000 a year, and we would get more and more highly qualified teachers every day. So experience is very important. And, I think education in schools can sometimes run like businesses. And there's times where I know colleagues of mine at other school districts and things like that will pass up an older teacher because they cost more.
Oh.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because their salary is more.
Sure.
So a lot of times, especially once they max out and they're at the 20-year mark, most teachers max out on their pay at 20 years. A lot of people don't know that is in Texas. So 20, 21 years. And if once you've reached that mark, you're not actually getting any more raises.
Mm-hmm.
So how ridiculous is that?
Yeah.
Most companies, you're going to get some type of raise based on something every year.
Yeah.
Right?
And a watch.
Our teachers max out.
Yeah, actually, I grew up with one of my best friends' mother was we met her as my brother's second grade teacher. And that was the first year we met her. And I was like 3 years old and she had been a teacher ever since. So she's a teacher in the same school district, I believe in the same school for nearly 30 years before retiring. Wow. And she, I think she only switched grades maybe once or twice from second grade to, I believe, fourth grade. And, she hung in there. She did it because she loved it, but she maxed out years before she retired. And it was just frustrating, but it was something she had to deal with.
Y'all have heard of Ron Clark. He has an awesome school in, I think, North Carolina called Ron Clark Academy. He did a poll on Twitter the other day and just asked a bunch of because most of the people that follow him are in education of some kind, and asked, hey, what incentives would help keep teachers make them want to come to work? And he asked, 4 different questions and polled, is it more vacation time? Is it, less work hours during the week? Is it $20,000 more money a year? Is it da-da-da-da? Well, by like 70% or something like that, everyone voted for the $20,000 more dollars. So the monetary thing, once you lose that, I think it's just a natural thing to kind of tie that to your worth as a professional. And I think that it's a fun time in education because mentalities are starting to shift and change, where school used to kind of be set up the same way it had been since 1900 all the way until now. And we're just now starting to see this really cool revolution, I think, in public education, where we're really kind of taking kids individually and saying, how does this kid learn? How can we help them do this? To where it used to be, I call them death rows, one row of chairs and the teacher sat in front and they talked and everyone else shut up and you turned your homework in and you went on your way. Well, that's not how school works anymore. And I think that's the fun thing about it. And we're starting to really start having conversations about, well, hey, if we're going to give $200,000 budget to our athletic program, what are we telling everybody that's coming into our schools is most important?
Mm-hmm.
In Texas, that athletics is king. And it's one of those things that you learn quickly. Hey, you have to learn how to compromise with, because if you don't, you can get run off and not have a job if you're not willing to work with athletics and things like that. But to me, I see a big shift and a lot of changes in the positive starting to take place in public education. And it's exciting to be kind of in the middle of it.
Leading into my next question of how you would improve the education system, are you looking for it to continue on that route, or is there something you would tweak to change?
I think the biggest change, if we want to continue to have a positive impact on students and we want to see public education be important, the biggest change is going to have to be teacher pay. It's just too important, and it's gotten too, there's so much of a gap involved in from school district to school district, like in Texas, but even from profession to profession, where, like I said, I've got 2 master's degree and a bachelor's degree. Well, a lot of people that I know that have those same types of degrees or have doctorates and things like that make a lot more money than I do. Yet, I still work 70, 80 hours a week and managing 30 adults and, 300 students and, 8 custodial staff, and go down the list, So I think until states and officials are willing to look at how schools are financed and how we pay our teachers, and really it starts with administrators like myself, and it starts with superintendents or leaders of those schools looking at budgets and changing them and saying, no, we're not spending $200,000 on football helmets. We're going to pay our teachers because it's more important.
That's 100% fair, and it feels weird that athletics would take a front seat. But I guess that's just the difference between like Texas and say Maryland. Like you guys very, very much value your football down there.
Well, to give you a perspective, like right down the road from us, 40 minutes down the road is McKinney, Texas, and they literally just passed a bond, and they're going to build a $60 million athletic complex for their district. $60 million for, in essence, 3 high schools to play football at.
Yeah. Wow. I actually went to high school in the Arlington School District, and Lamar Vikings. And our team during my time in high school wasn't the hottest. They weren't the greatest, but it was still, you could still feel the tradition, the vibe of like how important football and the whole program was to our school and to our community. So.
Yeah, well, and I'm saying this as an ex-football coach. So I coached football for 10 years, and I've seen both sides of it. So, and that's the crazy thing, and the thing that we juggle as administrators is extracurricular. So all of extracurricular, from one-act play to football to all those things are really enrichment type of things. And I think that's when we have to change our mentality and try to get us to understand. I may have a kid walking through my building. The only reason he gets up and comes to my school every day is because he loves athletics. I need to use that to my advantage and get him here because of it, but use that as an enrichment piece and get him to understand how important the other things are as well.
Yeah, not the sole thing, but a big thing. Like have it be an incentive, but not the only reason to be there.
Yeah, so I hate the fact that like some school districts they're hurting for a bigger budget. I mean, when it's tied at least in part to the local funding, and you have Manhattan, where every school is like essentially has $1 billion budget just because of like the housing around it and like the tax situation that they have versus like, well, you're in a small town in Texas, good luck. It's just not, it seems odd that we would tie those two together and there wouldn't be a federal budget and it was even across all schools and it depended upon maybe your class size more so than anything else. Or even if you tied it to performance and did something like that, that would make more sense to me than, well, you know what? These houses are worth $800,000 and these houses are worth $100,000. So this one has 8 times the funding.
In Texas, we even have like a Robin Hood system, where our rich schools, they're called Chapter 84 schools, they actually pay money back to the state, and the state takes their money and throws it back at a smaller school. So, in Texas, the way the budget works is the state has kind of rigged up some systems to make it look like they're funding a lot in education, when really they're just stealing from rich schools and giving to poor schools sometimes. And again, the disparity, we want that budget money and it helps us, but at the same time, it's still not enough for us to compete with. For us, a rural school district, my teachers literally could live here or leave here, drive 20 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour and a half, and make anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 more a year as a teacher.
Yeah, that's significant enough for that kind of a commute.
And then you're talking budget wise too, where we're really lucky. We do a good job. Our business manager does a fantastic job of maintaining our budget and. One of my goals as a campus administrator is, even for a small school, is that when my kids that walk through the door, they're going to have the same opportunities as any other kid in the nation if they walk through any other door. And that's what we strive to give them. But there's a lot of places where, they might have 5 or 6 computers and that's all they got. And you have other schools that like McKinney ISD, they're a 1-to-1 school district, meaning that every kid that goes to their school gets some type of device from the school. So it definitely can put you at disadvantages because of budget, and you have to work extra hard because of that. And because normally if you're at a poor school district, it's because your kids are coming from lower income groups. And every piece of research out there in education that you read will tell you that a student from a fluent home is going to perform better in school than if it was a poverty-stricken home. Fluent homes, like there's a number out there, like 1 million more words, right, when they start kindergarten. So if my mom and dad both went to school, both have jobs, I come home, I start kindergarten, I've heard and know 1 million more words and phrases than a kid from a poverty home who maybe is a one parent who works 2 jobs that I see a couple hours a day. So those are things that no one ever puts on paper and doesn't talk about in education, that we are fighting as educators to try to close gaps and try to help our students that are in poverty break that poverty cycle.
So the biggest fix would be teacher pay. Like that seems like pretty straightforward. I wonder if we could put them like on a GS scale, like with other federal employees. Like say you're a federal employee and you're a GS 7, you'll get $40,000 a year. If you're a GS 8, you get $50,000 a year. You're a GS 12, you get $100,000 a year. And then as you go up the GS scale, you get paid more and more until you're off the scale in your SES. And I guess you could save those for like superintendents or whatever. But
you're blowing my mind.
Well, I mean, and that's the crazy thing to me is I literally think like if say tomorrow I became the superintendent at this school district, and I went to my budget manager and I said, I want you to start from scratch. I want to pay every teacher $100,000. No ifs, ands, or buts. I don't care what level they're at. $100,000 with no raises, no nothing. 1, all my teachers would want to stay. 2, every teacher from the surrounding area, all my good teachers everywhere would want to come and work for me. And I might have to get creative to make sure I'm maintaining my building and things like that. But what I would create is I would create a super quickly system that allowed competition, because I think competition's good, and I would have a bunch of teachers fighting for positions to come work for me that were going to do a fantastic, amazing job. And now, so get this, all right? So if I'm a teacher, I'm a normal teacher. I teach, high school U.S. history. I'm working anywhere from 50 to 70 hours a week. For a salary of, say I'm a first-year teacher here in Linden, Texas, for $36,000 a year. Well, I'm going to do that for a little while, and then I'm going to realize, hey, I can go do this job that's easier, that doesn't ask me to work as long, and I can still make $15,000 to $20,000 more dollars out of education, right? But if I'm paying teachers $100,000 and I'm asking you to work hard and do 70 hours worth of work, well, all of a sudden the compensation's worth the work. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Right. Absolutely.
So I think teacher pay could fix public education in overnight.
I would really like to see that experimented with. I would like to see a small school pop up that actually did have teachers paid $100,000 just to see what the student performance was. Because if this is actually the case and like teachers do stick around and the test scores go up, I don't think that anyone can make the argument against it.
I see like a ripple effect happening as far as like really good teachers in a small school, small class size. Like that's exactly where I would want my kid to be.
Yeah, that's exactly
is in a smaller school where there's, less distractions and more focus on my kid individually with these great teachers who are happy and satisfied with their job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it gives you as an administrator a lot of power and ability too, because, hey, look, I'm going to pay you $100,000. My expectations can grow then too.
Yeah.
Like I expect every time I walk in your classroom, you're up and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I expect to have lesson plans turned in on time. I expect for you to have the prep work done, that whenever I walk into your classroom, you've created a creative, interactive, good, solid lesson based on research. So it's a little bit more difficult whenever you're paying that teacher $36,000 and it's hard and you're working hard and it's the middle of the school year and you're like, man, I know everybody's tired and I know we've already had 10 pep rallies and you haven't had those kids 10 weeks in a row on Fridays for your 8-period class. So I mean, it just, to me, like if I could snap and turn around, we paid every teacher in Texas $100,000, no ifs, ands, or buts. Whether you're a 20-year teacher or a first-year teacher. 1, I think all your teachers would work really, really hard. 2, I think they would, instead of feeling like the whipping boy I think they would have puffed up chests and have a little bit of pride in their profession. Because go poll right now. There's just not a lot of people that want to be teachers anymore.
Yeah.
And there's too many teachers. Like this is another experiment for y'all, is to send out a survey to teachers and say, one of the questions should be, would you recommend education for kids in college? And I think what you're going to see is probably over 50% would tell you no.
Wow.
And I think that's a sad state,
because
I still think education is needed. I think public education is needed. I think it's a very fantastic, amazing, noble profession that people should be doing. And we should have more and more kids wanting to come be teachers. And I think some of that is our folks that are professors and things like that are on college campuses need to be, jumping up and down on the corners of the street saying, hey, you need to be a teacher. It's fantastic. But also the folks that can control teacher pay and the groups that are, lobbying senators and stuff for voucher systems and things like that to try to fix public education. Public education doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be supported. And I think if we support it, we'll see a fix, a very quick one.
I completely agree. So I don't know. I hope that we're able to fix it. I hope that we're able to increase the budget. It doesn't look like we're going to do it in this administration, but hopefully in the next one we'll be able to increase the budget. All right. So go to polypsych.org where you can listen to all of the shows. You can subscribe to the PolyPsych podcast on iTunes, Podcast Addict, Player FM, wherever you get your podcast. Again, this show's Anthony Lindsay
and Stephanie Marino.
And it was Chris Mason. Thanks for listening.